So let's talk about the Liquify tool in Photoshop and what it can do to be able to go in and kind of morph and rework images. We're going to use the picture of a person because one of the things that the Liquify tool does is it's got this really cool face-aware manipulation. So what I'm going to do is go to my Layers panel. I'm going to right-click on my layer and convert this to a smart object. And the reason why is because the Liquify is destructive. Now there's a couple different ways that you could handle this. If I didn't want to convert this to a smart object and I undo this, I could just do a selection around an area that I would like to go in and liquefy, do a Command J to then put this on its own layer here, because this is going to go ahead and manipulate the pixels. And in this case, I put a selection around the eye, did a Command J, and that's going to copy just the eye by itself. Now when I do this, what happens is this does manipulate this section of the new layer that I've created. If I go into the Filter menu and choose Liquify, the only thing that's going to show up is that specific active layer. So this is okay. It's not normally the way I would do it, so I would definitely probably go in, right-click, and convert this image to a smart object. That way I can go in and do the Liquify filter, and I can then work on this as a smart object, so it's non-destructive, and then these show up as filters. So I'm going to go into the Filter menu, and I can go under Liquify. Now there's one interesting thing here. If you go into Filter, you see Convert for Smart Filters is grayed out. And converting for smart filters is simply just saying convert this image to a smart object. So if I had not converted this to a smart object and I go into the Filter menu, you'll see convert this layer for smart filters. And that's the same thing as right-clicking and choosing convert to smart object. Once I do, you can see that this is going to turn it into a smart object. You'll click OK, and there's the smart object icon. Two different ways to get to the same point. So now with it converted to a smart object, I go into the Liquify. And Liquify is going to launch its own application within Photoshop. Now here, we've got our basic tools here. We've got our forward warp, our reconstruct, our smooth tool, twirl, pucker, and bloat. I know, it's like, isn't that crazy? I love that. And then we have our freeze and our thaw tool, as well as our face tool, which gives us the face aware. So if I go, let's just jump to the face aware, or the face tool here. And the face tool, when I click on it, it's going to recognize a person's face. Now, if we go over to the right side here under the Properties section, we can choose the Face Aware Liquify. And by the way, this won't work with your pet. You know, this only works with people. Under the Face Aware Liquify, we can go in and select multiple faces, by the way. In this case, there's only one that's in focus, so it's not going to pick up the person in the background. And we can control the eyes and the nose and the mouth and the face shape. And you can see we can do all these things, the size, the height, the width, the nose, everything. And it's nice to have this over here, but the reality of it is going in here and hovering over any section of the face. Now, when I go over and I hover over the entire face, you'll see that I've got all these points here. Okay, and you can hover over these and you can see that I can pull the face width overall, make it skinnier or narrower. Look at that, it doesn't even move the eyes. That's pretty cool. I can go in and kind of redo the chin and the neck right here. I can go in and kind of bring out the jawline right here as well, and just pull those points, move the forehead up or down right there, and of course go over to the left and right there. If I go into the eye here, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see this a little bit better. When I go into the eye, I've got several different options here. So here on the top, I can go in and make the eye larger and smaller. At the bottom, I can do the same thing. It's going to keep that larger and smaller. On the right, I can make it bigger, basically wider or narrower. With a diamond here, this allows me to increase the size overall, both width and height. And I can also hover out here, and I can also slightly rotate the eye as well. Going over to the nose, I can just simply take the nose right where it is here. You can see I can just move the entire nose around without clicking on any of the points. I can click on the point and choose the nose height, which will move it up and down. And then I can do the nose width, which allows me to pull that in. And again, I can just grab this and move that all around the face. Lips, same thing. I can grab that and move that. I can also do the lips separately. So the lower lip and the upper lip as well. I can adjust those. I can pull it wider here, and I can also rotate this as well. But the crazy part is this is what I love here. I can go way outside the dotted line here, and I can do the smile. So I can actually make somebody smile more, a little bit too fake, but I can also go in and kind of lessen their smile a bit. So if somebody just isn't smiling quite enough, I can go in there and take care of that. So there's a lot of amazing things that you can do with the face tool, okay, or the face aware Liquify. And it's fun to play with this kind of stuff. But what I want to do is I'm going to go in and I'm just going to do the forward warp tool here, which is basically something that we use to be able to start to move and kind of reconstruct and kind of like clay, you can kind of rework this. Now when I grab the forward warp tool, we have our brush tool options. We have our size, which of course is controlled by the right bracket and the left bracket. And we also have the density, and the density is basically the feather. So if I hold down my command option here, or control option, you can see that that's what I have. I have a very low density, which is a very soft cursor. And the density means that when I control option click, you'll see that most of the pull is going to happen in that red area, and then it's going to fade off to the side. So let me just show you how this works. So I have a very low density, and I pull on something. You'll see that it only pulls kind of in the middle of that cursor. Now the pressure is really important because the pressure is how much you pull based on how much you move your cursor. With a very low pressure, you're going to have a lot of cursor movement and very little movement happening on the image. Very high pressure, you're going to go ahead and where you click and move, you're going to get a lot of movement. Now, if the density is set way up and the pressure is set way up, you're going to have the entire cursor move at the same rate that you move your cursor, so all the content inside. So I'm going to cut the density down because when I hold down my control option, I want to make sure that I get, less of the cursor actually doing the dragging. So it's more focused in the center here, and it's less focus around the outside edges. And think of the pressure as taking two fingers and kind of grabbing a piece of paper and slowly pulling. A pressure of 0 means you're barely pulling the paper with your fingers. So the paper isn't moving, but you're creating a little bit of friction. 100 pressure means when you grab, you're going to grab, and whatever you pull, whatever distance you pull, you're going to pull that paper. So I usually do kind of a pressure in the 20s or 30s. And when I do that, and then I set my density, it's going to focus it in the center of the cursor, and then less so all around. So here, if I wanted to just move his eyebrow up a little bit, I could just simply resculpt this a little bit, come up here, and I could just kind of move and resculpt. Now you'll notice his eye is a little bit flat here, and I'd like to come in here and I'd like to just kind of lift that up a little bit at a time, and then I let go of the mouse. Now you can see I'm also moving the eyeball too, and I may not want that. I like where that upper curve is, but now I've gone in and I've kind of reworked his eye a little bit. So what I'm going to do is hold down my Option or Alt key and click the Cancel button, which will then become Reset, and it's going to reset this back. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the Freeze Mask tool. And the Freeze Mask tool, I'm going to go and have a smaller cursor. And what I do is I don't want to go in and I don't want to kind of move his eye at all. So I'm going to freeze this area right here so it can't be pulled. Okay, so it's going to show up there. And that's going to be my freeze area. I'm going to go back to my forward warp tool, and anything that I do will not move my frozen area. It's basically protecting it or masking it out, which is really good. I can then go to my thaw tool, which is also a brush, and I basically get rid of that area. So if I go back to my forward warp tool and I decide that I'd like to move this down, but not move the eyebrow, I'm going to use the freeze tool and I'm going to freeze that area. Then I'm going to go to the forward warp here, and I don't have to work so hard with making sure that I'm not moving certain areas. And the freeze mask tool is going to freeze those areas. Grab the thaw tool, get rid of it, and rework it. And this is the kind of thing that we use all the time as we just go in and basically restructure things, move little lips, change ever so slight features here, kind of move things, just balance things out. Now we also have some really weird ones too, but that are kind of fun that you can see. The twirl tool, we have the twirl clockwise, which when we click on something, it twirls the whole thing clockwise. And if you want to twirl counterclockwise, what we're going to do is we're going to hold down the Option or the Alt key, and that will twirl the opposite direction. We have the pucker tool, which is right here. And the pucker tool will take anything that we have and it will actually bring it in to make it somewhat smaller. So if you want to reduce some features. And then we have the bloat tool, which is exactly the opposite. That's going to go in and take it and make something larger. And sometimes people's face is not completely symmetrical. You want to rework certain things, make them larger and smaller. You can with a pucker and bloat tool. And then you can use the freeze mask tool to keep things from being moved. And then the thaw, which basically undoes the frozen part of it there. So I'm going to click OK, and we're going to come back into our file. So this is our image, and then this is our smart filter here. And if I would like to get back into the Liquify that I've done, I can see that I've got my image here, and I've got my smart filter, and right there is my Liquify. So if I double click on that, it's going to relaunch the Liquify, and then I can continue on right where I left off. And click OK. If I turn off the Liquify feature, I can get everything back to where I was at the beginning there without using the actual Liquify filter. And you can see I've gone in and I've kind of shifted his face a little bit, moved things around. And this is great for anything. It's not just for people's faces, even though it's used quite a lot for people's faces, but you can use this for clothing and things that are slightly wrinkled or things that are slightly bent. It's nice to go in and be able to move these things around with a Liquify filter and doing them all non-destructively, which you definitely have to do non-destructively, because if you don't, then you have to undo everything to get back to where something didn't work out so good. Now, I would definitely use this Liquify after I've gone in and done a lot of my retouching. Once I do my retouching, I'd select all my layers and turn everything into a smart object and then do the final Liquify after that. That's how I just go through and I make sure that everything is set up and working good, and then I liquefy it, and that way I'm moving everything around. And with everything being inside the smart object, all of my retouching layers, it just makes it that much easier to work with.